morning sun shines on the gleaming hide of a muscular ranch horse. The aroma of bacon and coffee drifts from the wood cook stove at a cow camp. Silver spurs jingle as the men and women of the West get set for another day in the saddle. From the heart of Canada's finest ranching country, this is the Spirit of the West with rancher and horse trainer Hugh McLennan and his collection of music, poetry, and conversations with the folks who live and work with horses and cattle in the Spirit of the West.
Well, the calves are still coming, and I've had a couple of neighbors issue an invitation to come and heel calves for their brandings, and I'm open to more. Horses are shedding hair, and I guess what was a great ski season is done for another year. And this week, the cowboy, horseman, author, musician, and screenwriter Mark Rashid is back with more of a fascinating conversation.
He picked up a single hock and dragged the calf up to the fire, and this old woman came up and cut his rope.
Baxter Black talks about the similarity of riding without having a job to do and going shopping when you don't need anything.
I feel better if I'm horseback for a practical reason. So in deference to my wife, who often goes shopping the way cavemen went hunting, with no specific game in mind.
On the Rangeland News, some innovative ways to protect livestock from predators.
Things like range riding or flattery or electrified fencing or permanent fencing.
On the Urban Saddles and Western Wear horse training file, a rider has a pretty nice horse, but he takes about 15 steps to come to a stop, and when he does, he won't stand still. And I'll share some good ways to deal with this. The North Dakota ranch wife, Yvonne Hollenbach, is in the Cowboy Poetry Spotlight, and we're going to get her going with a song that was written by Jack Hanna, done by the Bar J. Wrangler.
Cowboys all of springtime, on this we do agree.
Grass, trees, birds, and bees play their symphony.
My spirit sings, my horse has wings, because I'm gonna be
riding for the roundup in the springtime. Hey, riding hell-bent for leather, hear the hoofbeats pounding and my old rider sing. Yippee-yo, 'cause there just ain't nothing better, riding for the roundup in the springtime.
You can hear those cowboys rousting from their bunks at early dawn. They check their gear and rigging as they cinch their saddles on. They've had their beans and bacon 'cause the day is hard and long, riding for the roundup in the springtime.
Hey, riding hell-bent for leather, hear the hoofbeats pounding and my old rider sing. Yippee-yo, 'cause there just ain't nothing better, riding for the roundup in the springtime.
Well, it's out and riding circle across the rough and rugged land, stride an eager pony sitting tall and looking grand. I hasten to the gather, my old pony's a dipping sand, riding for the roundup in the springtime.
Hey, riding hell-bent for leather, hear the hoofbeats pounding and my old rider sing. Yippee-yo, 'cause there just ain't nothing better, riding for the roundup in the springtime.
You can smell the hair a burning and the calves are all frustrated, mighty scared and lonely from their mother separated.
They feel the loop that drags them to the branding iron that's weighted to mark them for the roundup in the spring.
When the dogies all are branded and we turn the critters out,
we're heading for the tavern, every cowboy knows the route.
As we're rolling back the carpet, all the cowboys give a shout. We'll be
riding for the roundup come next springtime. Yay, riding hell-bent for leather, hear the hoofbeats pounding and my old rider sing. Yippee-yo, 'cause there just ain't nothing better, riding for the roundup in the springtime.
riding for the roundup,
in the springtime.
We were watching a YouTube video of horseman Mark Rashid doing a demonstration riding a former racehorse that hadn't been off the track very long. And I asked Mark to explain some of what was happening. It was pretty fascinating.
Really enjoyed just your little demonstration of how you would be in a nice, easy, loose rein walk, and he's walking out freely, and then all you would do would be tighten your muscles a little bit, and you could immediately see his response to that.
Yes. Yeah. So any muscles that we tighten in the saddle, the horse is going to tighten a corresponding muscle. And that was, I've had several horses that I've clinic with since Pie. And people are always amazed when I demonstrate that, how little it takes. And of course, when they do it on their horse, and get the same response, it becomes a little bit more clear to them. So, the idea is, for when we're riding, at least for me, is to only use the muscles that you need to use to do the job you're asking your body to do, or the horse's body to do. So, trying to get muscles to turn off. So, in other words, we're trying to develop relaxation. So, and not use more energy or more muscle than we need to use to do the job. So, and same thing with, when we're asking a horse to do it. So that was that, I think, that demonstration. It's been a while now since we filmed that. That was, gosh, that's got to be 10, 12 years ago.
It could be by now, yeah. 'Cause have you done much music on horseback? Playing a guitar, riding a horse, that kind of thing?
I have never done that. I've never had any call to do it. So yeah, no, I've never done it.
You don't see too much of it. I've played around with it a fair bit.
Yeah.
I don't use my good custom River Song guitar doing that, though. There's just picking it up off the ground and banging it on the saddle horn, and not a good thing.
And I know Michael Martin Murphy did that for a while. I don't know if he's still doing it, but he did some shows on horseback.
He did, right?
Yeah. I played with him back in the 80s.
You did?
I did early or mid 80s or something.
Oh man, that's.
Yeah, he was just sort of transitioning over to, more of the cowboy stuff.
Coming up, we've got to play a song from Michael Martin Murphy, and there's more from Mark Rashid when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. Mark Rashid has had a lot of success helping riders overcome the fear they sometimes feel after something has gone wrong. So let's get back to the visit.
Now, do you take in outside horses, problem horses still, or are you still pretty much just focused on teaching and clinics and that kind of thing now?
Yeah, we don't. We don't take in outside horses or do outside lessons anymore. We just don't have the time for it, and we've had to downsize since we. It's basically just my wife and I, and our daughter takes care of things when we're gone. So, we downsized as far as our land. We don't have cattle anymore. It's just too much for one person to handle when we're gone. So, and we're just not around enough to be part of all of that in the way that you need to be. So we just these days it's just pretty simple. When we're on the road, we're on the road, and when we're not, we're here at home and taking care of the things that we need to take care of here at home, and hanging with the dogs and
how many
cars and
right and writing books and gosh.
Yeah, my wife is a great writer.
Wow.
She just put out 2 books in the last year.
That's right. Yeah. One was about kind of her journey from being quite fearful to being comfortable and confident. And
yeah, she had a really bad wreck a few years ago, and and all she was doing was just sitting on the horse. And this horse had some physical issues that we couldn't seem to track down, but she had been doing really well. And she had just gotten on her, and I was on my horse, maybe 10 feet away from her, and the little horse just reared up and went over backwards. And, she hit her head, and the horse stepped on her when she got up and banged her around pretty good. And so it took her a long time to kind of recover from it. And so she did a lot of research on brain function, and that really helped her, and some therapy work, and now she's out riding again like nothing ever happened.
Well, we'll get into this a little deeper after this one. Now, Mark did mention that he has played guitar on stage with Michael Martin Murphey, and here he is.
Well, they mixed a little Celtic with Spanish blood and a dash of thoroughbred. So the legend begins of America's horse, a horse with a level head. If he's cutting cattle out on the ranch or making some cowboy shine, there's never been a horse like America's horse crossing that finish line. Oh yes, I'm a quarter horse rider. Saddle up and let me run. America's horse won't let you down when there's running or work to be done. And there's work to be done. Oh, give me a pony that's got some sense and knows how to work a cow. A horse that's rugged and keeps his head, takes off running right now. You can bet your money and bet your boots when he runs that quarter mile. You tie that calf in money time while the fans in the stands go wild. Oh yes, I'm a quarter horse rider. Saddle up and let me run. America's horse won't let you down when there's running or work to be done. And there's work to be done. All the names of the ones that went before will live on through all time. Old Gina Sensor, Archie in colonial days started the great bloodline. There was Steel Dust Traveler, Old Kodak, Little Joe King and Peter McHugh, Yellow Jacket, Cowboy, Old Joe Bailey, Jenny and Della Moore too. There was Shiloh, Billy and Locks Rondo, how old and Tucker could have run. Old Fred, Xenophon, Concho Colonel, and Joe Hancock, the mighty one. There was Mr. Sam Pepe and Impressive too, and the Oklahoma Star. Old Sorrel, Joe Reed, Flying Bob, Leo and Doc Bob. Oh yes, I'm a quarter horse rider. Saddle up and let me run. America's horse won't let you down when there's running and work to be done. Oh yes, I'm a quarter horse rider. Saddle up and let me run. America's horse won't let you down when there's running and work to be done. Oh yes, I'm a quarter horse rider. Saddle up and let me run. America's horse won't let you down when there's running and work to
Well, if you've been to very many of the main event trainers' challenges, you might remember hearing that song being played there at the round pen. Now, Mark Rashid had the interesting description of how his wife overcame her fear of riding after a pretty serious mishap, and we talked about how that can be a challenge for a lot of folks.
We all see that a lot, and it seems especially when people are over a certain age and they still, they're just have a burning desire to ride, but they've had something like that happen, and that fear just, it's just a little too strong for them. I just feel for them because I can see, I know you want to do this, but I can see that the fear is still controlling you,
Yeah.
How do you help them over that?
Well, it's interesting. We had a conversation with a neurologist. I think he was a neurologist and or a psychologist. I can't remember now because it was quite a while ago. And he said that the older that you get, usually it starts happening around 40. When we get up to around 40, our self-preservation systems kind of start kicking into high gear. And so, the body knows and the mind knows that we're kind of starting to circle the drain a little faster. And it's a mechanism that we are designed with to make sure that we don't do anything we aren't supposed to do, so that we can stay alive as long as we're supposed to. Not that you can't override that. It's just, to be able to do the things that you want to do. But if you understand that that's actually part of us, that we are actually designed that way, it helps take some of the sting out of it. And then you can deal with it on a more thoughtful basis, as opposed to just going, man, I never used to be afraid. No, you didn't. And now you are. And that's how that works. So,
can the horse sense that the rider is kind of focusing a little bit on fear and self-preservation, as opposed to when the rider is perfectly comfortable, confident, in a good place?
I believe so. People, even old-timers used to say that, a horse can sense fear. And there is something to that. The body puts off different chemicals and odors when we become fearful. There is something to that, I believe. And I've seen it in clinics, where somebody is really, really troubled about something, and then we give them a couple of things to do to try and get their mind off of it and on to something else, and you can see how the horse starts to calm down at about the same rate that the rider starts to calm down.
Well, Mark is going to talk about some of his experience working cattle on various ranches, and Baxter Black is next to discuss finding a purpose when the Spirit of the West continues right after this.
Howdy, friends. This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan, and I'll be right back after this with a little peek at finding a purpose.
Your land is a legacy, a challenge from those who tended it before you to build on their foundations. At Corteva Agriscience, we understand what it means to be the stewards of a legacy. We embrace the challenge of building on the foundation of Dow AgroSciences to maintain your trust, to bring new solutions, to help you care for your land. See how we can help build your legacy at rangeandpasture.com.
And for our Canadian listeners, just check Corteva.ca, the Canadian website.
The kindest thing I ever do for my wife is to ask her to pick something up for me when she's going shopping. Non-essential tasks are so much easier if there's some purpose involved, don't you think? I enjoy being horseback. I enjoy entertaining on trail rides, but I rarely accept an invitation just to go riding. However, I try to never turn down an opportunity to gather cows, check fence, go roping, brand at the neighbors, try out new horseshoes, or search for deer sign. Something serious, meaningful, worth doing. See you, dear. Me and the boy are going to the south pasture to check for, pick one, kudzu invasion, alien sighting, rhinoceros tracks, or sheep on the half-shell. We'll be back in a couple of hours. And how about border collies and bird dogs trapped in an urban backyard? Thank goodness they don't feel the need to lead meaningful lives, or they wouldn't be caught dead chasing frisbees or walking on their hind legs for a dog biscuit. Can't you imagine how their heart would sing for the sound of a shotgun or the smell of an old ewe? I've often wondered if martial arts people get so tired of posturing, practicing, and pulling their punches that they slip out and deliver a few swift kicks to the occasional jaywalker or rude motorist. I've seen ambulance drivers suddenly turn on the siren and speed up, and then you find them down the road about 3 miles at the coffee shop. Just a thrill, I guess. The Army, government bureaucracies, parents, and compassionate corporations insist on endless make-work projects to keep the oar pullers busy, at the ready, so to speak, and I could apply this same logic to riding a horse on a non-essential mission, just keeping the horse and man sharp, or at least mounted part of the time in case of a sudden stampede. It's the same logic used by NORAD, who keeps a third of their bombers in the air all the time. Well, whatever the cause, I feel better if I'm horseback for a practical reason, so in deference to my wife, who often goes shopping the way cavemen went hunting, with no specific game in mind, I feel I give her some focus and relief if I ask her to pick me up some specific item. Of course, it helps if what I want is on her way. This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan, brought to you by Corteva Agri-Science.
The 2021 Top Gun Spring Horse Sale runs April 6th to May 10th as an online timed auction. This is the best place to find your next great horse for any discipline. Ranch horses, team penners, all kinds of rope horses, kids horses, horses for mounted shooting, trail riding, and more. Bidding opens April 6th and closes April 10th. You can get all the information at TopGunHorseSales.com. The Top Gun Spring Horse Sale, following all the guidelines and helping you find your next great horse. For more information, call Jordan Dodds, 403-783-0246. I had a lot of fun recording those, but I think Billy would really like it if I'd patch up the bullet holes in the ceiling now. Boy, there's some great videos of those horses listed so far, and of course, no matter where you are, anybody can bid. Now, just ahead of the rangeland news, here's a great Canadian treasure. He's made a career out of playing guitar for folks like Ian Tyson, Cindy Church, Gary Velgard, and so many more. Nice to hear Nathan Tinkham in one of his own songs.
Well, Allison lives by the Big Bend, far from the ocean, she knows. She'll spend all day just fighting the heat, then the next morning it snows. She left her home on the West Coast to follow a cowboy out there. 20 years later, she's living alone with no one to watch or to care. The lines on her face have grown deeper, her fingers all blunted from toil. Such is the ravage that comes from living close to the dry desert soil. Just as the morning is stealing, in her hat, in her old working clothes, she rides out to cattle, living this life that she chose, where horses run wild and cattle wear horns, and everything else is covered with thorns. Back when the cholla was blooming, I stopped in just to see how my old friend was doing and what made her so different from me. Where horses run wild, cattle wear horns, and everything else is covered with thorns. Ghosts of bandits and rangers ride through the hills all around. The sun and the wind and the year still haven't covered the blood on the ground. Well, this ain't no place for a woman. The country's too hard, so they say. But Allison never would listen to that kind of talk anyway. Where horses run wild and Some cattle wear horns, and everything else is covered with thorns. I thought of the last time I saw her, sitting so quiet and near. She closed her eyes as she listened for something that I couldn't hear.
Rangeland News from the Spirit of the West, a roundup of issues and events from the world of agriculture.
At the top of page 1, it says, when you raise livestock in a remote region, losses to predators are inevitable. Cougars, bears, wolves, sometimes coyotes are some of the threats, and this is an interesting look at some of the ways to mitigate the threat from Rod Bain of USDA.
Integrated livestock protection is what it sounds like.
An integrated system basically uses the best tools at the best time to use those tools.
Regarding the protection of livestock from predators, according to Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service Wildlife Services, Julie Young. Her colleague, Elizabeth Miller, adds several of these tools and strategies are used in combination and are non-lethal.
Things like range riding or flattery or electrified fencing or permanent fencing, those are some of the most popular.
Young says ongoing study by Wildlife Services looks at the efficiency and cost effectiveness of these tools, both individually and working together as part of an integrated system.
We have several sources of data that we'll be looking at, including man hours and costs. And we want to make sure that the amount of livestock saved, the amount of conflict reduced really matters and is worth the time and money spent on these tools.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
117 food processing companies in British Columbia have collectively received $17 million through the Federal Emergency Processing Fund established in May of 2020. Recipients use these funds to improve worker safety and keep their businesses afloat during the market fluctuations caused by the pandemic. And recipients of funds range from meat packing plants to beverage companies, bakeries, fruit packers, and more. Well, you folks who hear us every Sunday on CJSN in Shaunavon, Saskatchewan, might have already heard this news. Oberle Farms is a purebred Charolais operation near Shaunavon, and they had 2 sets of triplets within a week of each other in late January. And all the cows and the calves are doing fine, and with the odds being 1 in 100,000, or 2% of cattle having triplets. Wow, maybe they should buy a lottery ticket. In spite of recent challenges, notably the impact of the pandemic on the food supply chain, the growth in farm income shows the sector is weathering these disruptions fairly well and adjusting decisions accordingly. That's what Ag Canada said in a news release. It said the total 10 net cash income for Canadian farms hit $16.5 billion last year, and that's $3 billion or 21.8% more than 2019. And the net operating income per farm grew by more, hitting $95,000 last year. That's a 25.4% leap from the 2019 figure of $76,000 per farm. Well, I think if this had happened in our area, it would have been solved in a couple of hours. Lots of good cowboys with good horses around here, but the police in Johnston, Rhode Island could use a couple of good hands, but apparently they don't have any cowboys there. A 1,500-pound steer escaped in February while being unloaded at Rhode Island Beef and Veal, a packing house in Johnston, and the steer, they say, is pretty wily, apparently, as he's only been seen a handful of times in the 6 weeks since he escaped. And the police say they can't actively chase the steer, but they do keep track of its reported movements. Our goal is to keep it contained in wooded areas where hopefully it remains unharmed. Please leave the capture to professionals, said the police in a Facebook post. And now the steer has captured the hearts of some residents who hope to provide him with a home in a sanctuary. Over 12,000 people have signed a petition started by Victoria Ferruccio Flores to save the Johnson cow. Wonder if they realize there's a difference between a cow and a steer. Next regular sale at the BC Livestock Co-op Kamloops Yards is April the 6th. Then on April 10th, it's the 46th annual Vanderhoof All Breeds Bull Sale. April 15th, it's the 86th annual Williams Lake Bull Sale and Show. You can get all the information and watch those sales live at bclivestock.bc.ca. Meanwhile, at the Innisfail Auction Market, regular cattle sales every Wednesday, of course, and on April 18th, the Danes Cattle and Bull and Female Sale. You get all the information at InnisfailAuctionMarket.com, and to list your cattle or find out more, give Danny, Mark, or Dwayne a call. And now the final item. The other day, my neighbor and skiing buddy Martin and I finished a fun day of skiing, and we were back in the pickup ready to head home. Boots off, skis and poles in the back of the truck, and the parking lot was a little bit tight, and my backup camera was covered with mud, but right next to us stood a real nice lady pointing behind us. And I figured, well, she was just letting me know how much room there was between my back bumper and the vehicle behind me. But her gestures were just a little hard to read. Anyway, I waved and we both smiled and drove away. And then when we got to Martin's place, we realized what she was trying to tell us. I had forgotten to close the tailgate on the truck. Oh boy, and that's the Rangeland News. Coming up on the Urban Saddles and Western Wear Horse Training File, a horse that has a hard time stopping and then he can't seem to stay stopped, when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. He's a pretty nice horse, but when his rider tries to bring him to a stop from a trot or a lope, he takes about 50 yards to come to a complete stop, and then when he finally stops, he has a hard time staying stopped. And we'll talk about some of the things that might help coming up on the Urban Saddles and Western Wear Horse Training File. Right now, though, we've been getting a lot of calls about what's happening to the Spirit of the West cruise. Well, as you probably know, we were shot down for 2020. 2021, we had planned to do it this coming June. Well, we got that one shot down, but we don't give up easily. We're postponing what Billy and I are calling our farewell Spirit of the West cruise until 2022. We still expect to have everything we had planned for this year and last year in place, and Jim and Karen have said that if you'd like to come, well, your deposits will still be held until then. And we're still making plans and preparations for having all of the group start things off with a visit to our place and a live concert with the Western Spirit Band and special guest Lewis the Big Rig McIver, my kidney donor. So we'd like to thank all of you who were planning on joining us in 2020 and 2021, and hope that you can adjust your dates and join us in 2022. A 7-day return cruise leaving Vancouver with a pre-cruise stay at Sun Peaks Resort and a visit, of course, here at the ranch. And although this was going to be our farewell cruise, we will continue to promote what will be known as the Friends of the Spirit of the West cruises, and we'll have special hosts for those as well. Get the details as they're worked out, as always, from Jim and Karen. They can give you lots of information at 1-800-530-0131.
Now it's time for the Horse Training File, brought to you by Irvine Tack and Western Wear, Canada's largest Western store.
Start thinking spring with help from Canada's largest Western store. That's right, spring stock is arriving at Urban Tack and Western Wear. See what's new and start suiting up with the latest from the biggest names in the biz. Boulay, Ariat, Wrangler, Cinch, Huey, and more. Jeans, jackets, boots, shirts, hats, hoodies, it's all here at Urban's, exit 305 off Highway 2 by Crossfield, or shop online at urbans.ca.
Don't just wear it, live it. Urban Tack and Western Wear.
A rider I was talking with is concerned about her horse. He's gentle, pretty nice to ride, and when she asks him to stop, even from a walk, he'll stop, sort of, But when she asks him to stop from a trot, he takes about 6 or 7 strides after she says whoa and starts to pull back on both reins before he finally stops. And then he won't really stand still. He kind of fidgets around until she lets him walk off. Well, there's a couple of ways to help this horse. One is the old reliable one-rein stop. From a trot, you use either the left rein or the right one. You move it out till the horse bends his neck and head in response. Then you bring your hand back towards the saddle horn and untrack his hindquarters and move his hips over. But that's not my preferred way, unless it's an absolute emergency, because there's always the chance a horse could lose his balance and go down. Here's what worked for me, and it's the way Jonathan Field showed me how to do it. In an area with fairly good footing, ride at a trot in a good-sized circle about 60 feet across or bigger. Concentrate on staying constantly on the path. As long as your horse maintains the speed and direction, leave him alone and trot at least a half a dozen, or better yet, a dozen circles, and then take him right to the middle of the circle. Ask him to stop with a verbal cue and with the reins. As soon as he stops, ask for a vertical flex and back him a step and then drop the reins and pat him and try and relax yourself. Let your breath out and let him stand there a minute or so, and before he wants to move, ride him back to the circle, trot him at least a dozen circles in the other direction, and then ride him back to that sweet spot in the middle that you are establishing. Ask again for a vertical flex, a step back, and let him rest. Now, it might take a few days of doing this, but I'll tell you what, you'll be amazed at how he'll start to hunt that sweet spot in the middle of the circle and respond to your verbal cue, because it means he can rest where he feels secure and comfortable. Once he does this on the circle, you can find a comfortable trail where you can establish another sweet spot. Ride him a couple of 100 yards up the trail at a trot, ask him to stop, ask for the vertical flex, and let him rest. Now, the first time he tries to do it in a new spot, he probably won't be able to stand still as long as he could in the center of your original circle. But as you repeat the exercise, he'll get comfortable, and he'll begin to understand that this is another good spot to rest. For our friends at Urban Saddles and Western Wear, that's the Horse Training File. Well, as we do this, I'm just looking out, and there's our horses with their heads hanging over the top rail, because it's almost time for their daily feeding of Hoffman's Horse Ration. Boy, that seems to really help them, and you can find out what's in it at hoffmanshorseproducts.com. The 2021 Top Gun Spring Horse Sale runs April 6th to May 10th as an online timed auction. This is the best place to find your next great horse for any discipline. Ranch horses, team penners, all kinds of rope horses, kids horses, horses for mounted shooting, trail riding, and more. Bidding opens April 6th and closes April 10th. You can get all the information at topgunhorsesales.com. The Top Gun Spring Horse Sale, following all the guidelines and helping you find your next great horse. For more information, call Jordan Dodds, 403-783-0246. You know, in nearly 29 years of doing this program, we seem to have developed a few patterns, matching the music to the time of year. And as far as what's going on around on a lot of ranches around the West right now, well, this guy wasn't even born 28 years ago when the show started. But since he recorded this, I try to work it in about this time of year because it sure fits. And it's personal and kind of biographical for Brett Kessel.
It's calving time, I've gotta go. My heart melts like late spring snow. When I'll be back, if God knows, He ain't gonna say. Daddy shoots a look at me. He says I'm a fool to dream a dream that breaks the hearts of so many and takes them far away from their home and from the farm and from their families, loving arms. But I've got 6 strings and 8 pistons, a song I've gotta get out of my system. The bullpen door's wide open, I'm pulling out and I'm high hoping, and it makes it all the worse that I'm leaving home at calving time. had worse. I used to love this time of year, being Daddy's right-hand man. You'd always hear it soft and low, and no one could have ever known that the music on the radio would make me who I am. Yeah, right there, that's me. That's exactly where I wanna be. 'Cause I've got 6 strings and 8 pistons, a song I've gotta get out of my system. The bullpen door's wide open, I'm pulling out and I'm high hoping. And it makes it all the worse that I'm leaving home at cabin time. I'm gonna miss my home and the farm. I'll miss my family's loving arms. But I've got 6 strings and 8 pistons, a song I've gotta get out of my system. The bullpen door's wide open, I'm pulling out and I'm high hoping. And it makes it all the worse that I'm leaving home at cabin time. But Daddy says he'll be alright without me there at cabin time.
Mark Rashid has calved a lot of cows and heifers, made a lot of miles in the saddle working cattle on several different ranches as well as his own, and since his success as an author, screenwriter, and musician, I kind of wondered...
You get a chance to go out and work cattle anymore, or get to any gathers, or roundups, or weanings, or heel calves at brandings, or are you just too busy for that stuff now?
We do bring in cattle. We do week-long or 10-day intensive workshops down south of Denver, and we bring in cattle for that. But I haven't been able to do really much ranch work at all in the last, probably 8 years. Usually I would get about this time of year, I'd get an invite, for the dates, when they would be sorting and branding. And I remember I went to a branding in California. It's kind of an interesting little story. I went to a branding in California. There was a woman, and I don't remember. She might have been the matriarch of the place or something. I can't exactly remember. And we had just started. We just started out, and I was just kind of building a loop and getting ready to pick up some heels. And the guy nearby, he picked up a single hock and drug the calf up to the fire. And this old woman came up and cut his rope and said, if that's the best way you can rope, then don't do it. I was real careful.
Yeah.
Because I had my favorite rope with me.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Now, if folks want to order your books and your DVDs and your demos, is markrashid.com the best place to go?
Yeah, that's the best place to go. Of course, Amazon has all of our books and all of that. The thing that we try to make sure we tell people is that, our main concern is just kind of getting the information out. That's our primary concern. And our secondary concern is, trying to make a little money off of the books and whatnot. And so when people buy books off of Amazon, it doesn't matter if it's mine or pretty much any author. they only make about 2 or 3 cents. The author does.
Right.
When people buy off of Amazon and those big companies. So, you know, if people are really interested in supporting authors, if they can find a way to get the book directly from the author, that helps the author out a lot more than if they pick it up on Amazon.
Sure hope our trails cross again somewhere before too long.
I do too. Thanks a bunch, Hugh. I really appreciate the visit.
Okay.
Coming up is this week's classic Song of the West and North Dakota ranch wife Yvonne Hollenbeck in the Cowboy Poetry Spotlight when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. This week's classic Song of the West comes from the pen of the prolific composer Cindy Walker, done by the great Ray Benson and Asleep at the Wheel.
Let's move them out and get on the trail, boys.
Dusty skies, I can't see nothing inside.
Good old Dan, you'll have to guide me right.
For if we lose our way, the cattle will stray, and we'll lose them all tonight.
With all of the grass and water gone, we'll have to keep the cattle moving on.
Sand blowing, I just can't breathe in this air.
I thought it would soon be clear and fair,
But the dust storms played hell with land and folks as well. Got to be moving somewhere.
I hate to leave the old ranch so bad, but I got to be moving somewhere.
So get along, Novies. We're moving off of this rain.
I never thought as how I'd make the change,
But the blue skies have failed. We're on our last trail. Underneath these dusty skies.
these ain't no tears in my eyes, just sand from these dusty skies.
Oh, Dusty Skies. Ooh, I like that. Anyway, here's a cute one for the Cowboy Poetry Spotlight from Yvonne Hollenbeck.
She was lonely in a city, in a life she'd learned to hate, and she thought that it would help if she could find herself a mate. For weeks she checked the classifieds, the lonely people kind, looking for the type of man that she would like to find. Alas, she happened on one that really caught her eye, and she knew at once that this would be the perfect kind of guy. The ad read he was lonely and looking for a wife, one who liked to cook and would enjoy his country life. It said he lived alone on a large Wyoming spread, and her heart began to flutter from this ad that she just read. Romance began to blossom as they courted through the mail, and both began to thinking that this match could never fail. She caught a train to Casper. It's a good thing it was night, 'cause vision isn't good, in a railway station light. And you know how you can visualize a body and a face, and when you finally meet them, you were really way off base? Well, she'd seen them in the movies and all those Western scenes, and the image of a cowboy had for years been in her dreams. Why, even cowboy poets like Baxter, Jess, and Pat are tall and dark and handsome. But this dude was short and fat. He had a big potato nose, a red and runny eye, and the cowboy she had dreamed of was a far cry from this guy. But there's a lid for every kettle and there's soup for every pot, 'cause a fancy, classy city gal was something she was not. She weighed at least 400 pounds. Most her teeth were gone. As he looked her up and down, he got to thinking something's wrong. But she'd come this far to meet him, so he'd best give her the test to see how well she'd like it on his ranch out in the West. The station agent told me that it was really quite a sight with him wedged into his pickup headed out into the night. And as you might imagine, it must have been a thrill when he told her that his home was waiting round that distant hill. But she must have been surprised when he finally came to stop before a wooden wagon with a rounded canvas top. She asked him where his house was, and he answered, "This is it," although he was concerned as to whether she would fit. Now many days have come and gone, and they make a happy pair, although they both were fooled, but neither seems to care. But they learned a real good lesson, and I hope you have learned one too, about the ads you happen on, to check them through and through. Just because a man's a rancher does not mean he punches cows. He might live on a hog ranch pigging out some sows. And every city gal don't always come with savoir faire. She might just be a country hick that's stuck a living there. So be careful of the classifieds. You better look before you leap, or you could end up in Wyoming in some wagon herding sheep.
Well, thanks again for riding along, and next week, my guest will be the champion chuck wagon driver, now retired, Rick Fraser, with a whole bunch of terrific stories. And thanks again to our support crew, Mark and Kathy McMillan. And if you enjoy this, you will love Canadian Cowboy Country Magazine. Subscribe online at cowboycountrymagazine.com. And be sure to check out our YouTube and podcast versions. Get the links at hugh-mclennan.com. Till next week, I'm Hugh McLennan. Hope to see you down the trail somewhere real soon.